the responsive through a number of different lenses. Got it. The objective here is to articulate goals of coach the responsive learning communities. That's going to become a lot clearer in a second. But it's important for us to have a driving purpose as a committee as we engage together. And I'll talk a little bit about the norms of that in a second. So right now I'm going to introduce what a coach the responsive learning community is, how we're going to engage in defining goals, and then we'll close things out. If you are moved and you feel passionate about continuing this work, we will stick around for about a half an hour longer than the end time of this meeting. That's on the calendar, wherever you're at in the world. We were supposed to meet for an hour, but if you want to continue meeting, we're going to stick around for about a half an hour after that, but don't feel obligated to. Just to set the mindset, a lot of you have been in sessions with me where I say just be yourself, participate with whatever energy you have, be open to diverse outcomes and perspectives. And we have to make things happen after the session. So I just want to define our terms. Our term here of coach the responsive learning community actually comes from a few writers, but the primary writer being Camille Wilson Cooper. And Camille Wilson Cooper talks about forming coach the responsive learning communities that are responsive to our diverse international school communities. And it involves us engaging in reflective practice through dialogue, shared learning, and leadership about coach the responsive education and the diversity collaborative. And I'll give a brief overview of what coach the responsive education is, but this is just me introducing the idea that the work that Dana and I are presenting to you came from research-based practices in a number of authors. We didn't create this. We're drawing on a number of other sources to frame our thinking. One of those sources, I think this is coming from Robin DiAngelo's book, Is Everyone Really Equal? Talks about how we need to look at culture through a lens beyond just ethnicity and nationality. When we think about culture, oftentimes it gets reduced to nationality, but these are all cultural constructs, and they all reflect social constructs in society. So when we talk about cultural identities, we're not just talking about ethnicity, we're talking about ability, we're talking about class, we're talking about colonial status, gender, language. Constance talked a lot about that intersectionality and having that intersectional lens. It's important when we approach being coach the responsive in our communities, we approach it with an intersectional lens that is all encompassing and representing all of our community members that are marginalized and minoritized. And those minoritized cultural groups that we're going to be focusing our work on in our committee are folks or people with disabilities, folks who are poor and working class, our indigenous brothers and sisters, women, transgender and genderqueer folks, non-standard English or non-English speakers, non-American, non-Western, people of color, non-Christian, and LGBTQ folks. We really want to center the folks that are routinely silenced in international school settings, in international school organizations. And we want to ensure that we're not just amplifying their voices, but we're learning to listen and embrace the multiple perspectives that our students are coming from. Dana, before I move on, do you want to hop in?
No, I just think that when we think, I love this page in general, and just the idea that DEIJ work it truly involves the intersectionality of all of these different components. And too often we tend, or at least tended in the past, to think about it through just one lens, and it's so multifaceted. And so, and when we look at our schools and our students, they're coming to us with all of these different components, and our teacher communities. So I think it's just imperative for us to continue this work.
So keeping it moving. If you want more of a primer on what coach the responsive teaching is, stick around in the main room and don't go to the breakout rooms to start developing goals and defining goals. But when we talk about being culturally responsive, we talk about folks in leadership or educators reflecting on their cultural lens through an intersectional lens, recognizing and redressing bias in the system, whether that's racism, sexism, heterosexism, ableism, et cetera, drawing on community members' culture to shape not just curriculum and instruction, but also professional development opportunity, bringing real world issues in both the classroom as well as professional learning settings, modeling high expectations for all students, as well as all adults, promoting respect for all individuals in their differences, collaborating with local community contexts, communicating in linguistically and culturally responsive ways, and recognizing that there's not only one way of communicating. We will be sharing out the link to this new America.org reflection guide that goes into this a bit more deeply. Our work together, though, is not necessarily to define culturally responsive teaching. Dana and I set a few action steps for building culturally responsive learning communities. Several of you all in presentations have seen me put the link to the ISS Diversity Collaborative, and that was to actively recruit diverse members within and outside of school, including educators, school leaders, support staff, parents, and students. And we have a diversity of folks just on this call. In addition, we want to democratically structure these culturally responsive learning communities. There's no ego with Dana and I. We want to let go as much as possible so that everyone is embracing a spirit of inquiry and collaboration. If you want to lead something, if you want help consulting with the school, if you want help giving PD opportunities at each other's schools, if you want to create a lab site at your school, whatever it is that you want, we will support and submerge ourselves in the background so that you can take the spotlight. So whatever you want, we want to create an open and inclusive atmosphere to be responsive to your needs, while also encouraging every member to assume collective and shared leadership. This might include setting meeting times, dates, and meeting and settings to encourage broader participation, because this might not be the right time for folks to meet. So if you want to have your own subcommittee in the education committee that tackles a particular issue, or you're passionate about something, let's use the Diversity Collaborative Forum in order to do that. The end goal is to treat education as a practice of freedom and to help engage in liberatory practices for all of those minoritized groups in international school settings. So just let us know how we can support you. Step 3 is really what we're focusing on. Go ahead.
I was just going to piggyback on what Darnell was just saying and say, you know, within the Diversity Collaborative, we have these different groups, right? So we're the educational committee, but in the advocacy committee, they've already structured this way as well. So some of you might be involved with some of those components as well. But for example, there was a group of us who really wanted to look at accreditation within advocacy. So we've kind of created our own subgroup. We meet outside of Nadine and Hanadi do not set those meetings and they're in charge of all of advocacy, or not in charge, but like run and co-facilitating that component. But then there's a group of us who just want to really focus and kind of pinpoint on accreditation and what that looks like. And so we've been working and setting our own meetings and things like that, and then bringing it back to the bigger group, which is really what we're trying to do, so that everyone has, just as much voice and choice in all of our conversations and where we want to go and why you're giving up your valuable time to work with us. So thank you.
And step 3 is we're inquiry-based. We're an inquiry-based community. We don't have all of the answers, and the questions are going to be more important than the answers. And we want to use those questions to help guide some of our priorities and our objectives, and to really focus our shared goals as a committee. So with that being said, we crafted some initial inquiry questions. They help guide us. We're not saying how we should answer these questions. We're going to leave that up to folks who are interested. If some of you all are familiar with the PLC cycle of inquiry, this will look familiar, except there's not 4 questions, there's 5. I just had to put the question 3 in here about teaching and instruction. And you also notice that there are 5 strands here. There's the curriculum development strand, school climate strand, recruitment and retention strand, professional learning strand, and the community outreach strand. In each one of these strands, we're focusing on how do we educate others in the international school community to further develop coach-to responsive practices through these 5 different lenses. So how do we educate school leaders and educators to develop a coach-to responsive curriculum? How do we educate school communities to develop a more coach-to responsive school climate? How do we help educate hiring managers in human resource teams to develop coach-to responsive recruitment and retention practices? How do we work with teaching and learning offices or offices of learning to develop coach-to responsive professional learning communities? And how do we work with advancement, parent engagement, and alumni groups at different international schools to develop coach-to responsive community outreach and engagement opportunities? So those are our 5 strands. Think about which strand you may be interested in exploring and further developing. There's a blank canvas, and sometimes that can be frustrating for folks, but just bear with us, embrace the ambiguity for now. We're keeping it a blank canvas because we want to engage in collaboration and partnership and not just creating something and putting it on a website and saying, this is what we've done. So we're looking for that collaboration. We're also looking for criticism, and we're looking for what's not here that needs to be here. So you will also, an invisible 6th group is there for you to explore if you wish through the lens of coach-to responsive education. There's also a few of you that may be on this call saying, I have no idea what you're talking about right now. What is this thing called coach-to responsive education? For those folks, stick around with me in the main room and we will explore and unpack the concept of coach-to responsive education. I have some resources for you to look at. But as long as everyone's embracing a spirit of inquiry and collaboration, we're all good. There are no rules for this. It's just, you can't be hierarchical in your collaboration with others. So leave your titles and positions at the door. If you're coming in with a school leader title, and I had someone in a call earlier today, just kept mentioning, he's the superintendent, he's the superintendent. No one cares. We're all coming to this space as equals, and we're all bringing something valuable. Okay, so I do care, but in this particular space, we're going to flatten the hierarchy and show a deep gratitude for each individual because we're engaging in collective and shared leadership that appreciates people's diverse perspectives. Everyone on this call is a problem solver. Let's keep the collaboration manager free. There is no boss, there is no leader. It's just all of us engaging in community together, just for an hour, then you can go back to your regular lives.
I love you, Darnell.
So with that in mind, when you get to these breakout rooms, you're going to engage in self-managed conversations. Introduce yourselves to folks. Say, hey, nice to meet you. I'm so-and-so. Decide who's a summarizer. That summarizer is going to be the speaker for your group when we come back. Also decide who's a timekeeper. I have a loose relationship with time, but I also know that people are trying to get out of here by the end of the hour. Give each other about 20 minutes to discuss. In a conversation steward, make sure no one's dominating. Note taker, if your group so chooses, we don't have to worship the written word. Take notes directly on this slide. Some of y'all have noticed that you can edit this slide deck. Go, by all means, you can edit the slide deck, edit and take notes, but everyone should be a participant. So there are 5 groups. 1 is the curriculum development. 2 is school climates, et cetera, and each group will have a slide that they can type on. The curriculum development slide is here. The questions that you all are going to be exploring are as follows. What issue do you recommend the curriculum development team or whatever team you're in, what issue do you all recommend that you address? Who does the issue affect and how? What factors shape the issue? What evidence do you have about this? What is your goal? And if you're successful, what is the change that you hope you will bring about in the international school community? So here's the school climates, recruitment, professional learning, community outreach. And if there's something we're missing because of our blank spots, we have a 6th room that you can go into and just create your own slide. You can edit the slide deck and create your own slide. If you're confused and you don't know what to do, or if you want to talk more, stick around in the main room, but I'm going to turn it over to Dana to do the breakout rooms.
So I've opened up the breakout rooms, and if you're not familiar on how to choose your own room, if you go to the lower right-hand corner, you'll see the 4 little boxes by breakout rooms, and you can click on there and you can join any one. I've named them. They follow the slide deck as well. So 1 is curriculum development, 2 is school climate, 3 is recruitment and retainment, 4 is professional learning, and 5 is community outreach. 6 is there's something you guys aren't talking about that we really need to focus on. Feel free to go. If you're not sure how to get there, stick around and we can put you there. And if you want to stick around and talk about culturally responsive teaching with and learning competencies with Darnell, feel free to hang out as well. And we'll get you where you need to go.
Let us know if you can't move. We will place you in the room of your choice.
Hi, I can't move. Could you put me in 3?
Sure.
Hey, Trixie. Yeah, I got
Hi.
you.
Thanks.
I'm David. I'm trying to get to curriculum development.
Okay.
All right, I got you.
Thanks. Thanks, Darnell.
Thank you, David. Let's see. It looks like Heather's all alone. All right, cool. All right, are y'all here with us?
I'm going to shoot over.
Hey guys,
Yes.
Dana, this
All
is
right.
Lindsay. I'm actually listening while I'm driving. I don't know if you're able to manually send me to a room by any chance, but I can't select anything on my
Oh,
phone.
Lindsay,
where do you want to
wanna
go?
The curriculum one? That'd
Okay.
be awesome. Thank
All
you.
right. There you go.
All right. I'm going over to
All
professional
right.
learning.
Cool.
Well, here's an awesome group.
Nobody's talking.
We were kind of debating on how long to wait for people to come in before we started a conversation.
I think it's good to start now because I just finished putting everyone in groups.
You would know that, Dana.
I'm
Always
feeling
good
a
to have-
little, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I said it's always good to have one of the organizers in the group to keep us on time.
Well, now I really want to know like where everyone is and what title you hold. But now I'm like, can we say that? Like, but not for I understood what Darnell was saying, but
I can tell you why I'm interested. Does that help? Without a title, my name's Bev Shackley. I live in Virginia. I've been working in international schools one way, shape, or form for maybe 25 years. What I'm really interested in, the reason I'm part of the professional development investigation of CRT is because we not only do a lot of teacher prep, but we also work with a lot of teachers who are in the schools. So it really helps us to know what you're doing so that we can do a better job of getting people ready for you. So that's really why I'm exploring it, and why I'd like to know what you have to say about what's out there, what's needed to be out there, what should new teachers know. I mean, I know what I think, but I'd really like to hear what you think. So That's why I joined you. And I'm happy to keep time so Dana can participate.
Okay, thanks.
I'm sure happy to go next. I'm Heather Nero, and I'm currently in West Africa, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Abidjan, at the International Community School of Abidjan. And I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say my title or not. I think, Samantha, did you want to know my title?
I mean, I just want to know, but it's okay.
I'm
Whatever.
trying to
anyone's
keep the title
comfortable.
away, and I'm trying. We're going through a lot of difficult times here, and so my title is lower school principal, and you know, I'm really enjoying my time here. But you know, I started joining this diversity collaborative last year. I've only been here 3 months, and I was in Central Asia in Kazakhstan. And then I was really looking for a very, very diverse community. We have 85 different nationalities here. It's the most diverse school I've worked at, and I've been in international education for 29 years now. I love it, but we are a long way from being culturally responsive, and it's bothering me. And so there's a lot of work that we have to do. So professional development, I did want to go into the school climate one, but nobody was there. So I hopped into yours. And I really do want to know what professional development is out there. We need more professional development. And we actually spoke to Darnell on Monday to help us move our school along as well. We're at the very beginning stages. If you look at the continuum, we're at the bottom right now. And I was shocked because I'm in Africa and we've got a lot of work to do.
I can go next. My name is Kimberly Daly. I am in Virginia, and I work with pre and in-service teachers who are all over the world, and I'm interested in professional learning for a couple of reasons. As I said, I work with the ones who are just learning to teach, but then I work with teachers who have been in the classroom for a very long time. And I also work on a grant where I work with teachers in 3 school districts in the United States. So, you know, I'm really interested in how this also may transfer to them. And I've been working with international education, researching international education for probably almost 15 years now. So, you know, I'm kind of in the muck in these issues. So, but I'm very happy to be here.
I can go next. So I'm Samantha Sam, and I'm in Guatemala at the American School of Guatemala. And the reason I'm interested in this community is I've been a part of the Diversity Collaborative community for a little over a year through a professor at Wilkes University, since I'm in a program there.
Yeah.
And I'm an instructional coach, so I don't mean to say my title, but that's why I'm really interested in it, because a part of my job is professional learning, professional development, and especially at my current school, where we have it's a dual language bilingual program. So we have a lot of faculty that represent Guatemala, and they're considered our local hires. And we also have a lot of faculty that are foreign hires. And I think even navigating some of those things when it comes to culturally responsive has been very, very tricky for us. And like many other schools, we're going through some pretty rough times with our various stakeholders right now. And I just want to be a better coach to serve teachers and students better.
I can go next. So my name is Emin. I am coming from normally Azerbaijan. It is Eurasia. It's a country, small country. I was working in Korea and Japan for 12 years as head of school. Currently, I'm in New Jersey. I'm working in an independent school as STEM and innovation coordinator. Also, I'm dealing with the accreditation, MSA. Also, I'm visiting team member of the MSA accreditation that visiting the schools. And I'm doing my master's in the College of New Jersey. Like, I have MBA, but I'm doing like educational master's. And one of actually my course was like foundation and the responsive teaching. It's really amazing, and I'm trying to learn from others because I'm also a kind of instructional designer, I can say. So I'm designing through the Rubicon. We are designing lessons here, and like I'm trying to understand our teachers, our students. Plus, like from my perspective, I have two daughters. They were in Japan, they were in Korea, now they are in US. Like it's a kind of culture shock. They were born in Korea. So it's kind of like difficult for them also. And plus, like I can see that like we are becoming more diverse currently community. So how can we serve? How can we make this community to have like the same kind of culture in the classrooms, in the school environment? So because of that, I want to learn more. I want to understand like the clear things that really we can help to design our learning for the future.
Awesome. And Amin, what part of New Jersey are you in?
I couldn't hear you.
What part of New Jersey?
I'm in Wayne.
Okay.
Wayne.
It's up north.
I
Okay.
live in Totowa, but my work is in Wayne.
I'm in, hi, I'm Dana Watts. I'm in Princeton, New Jersey. And so that's why I was wondering, although I still am learning New Jersey, so I don't really always know where places are, because I was overseas forever prior to locating in Princeton and working with ISS. My unofficial title would be PD addict. And Liz Duffy tells me that all the time. That was my dissertation. That is what I love. That is what I'm developing in my job. And I love to participate in it, create it, develop it, all of those components. And I think when I think about culturally responsive teaching and competencies, you know, Darnell taught this. He and I taught 2 courses together last spring. And he was the one who first introduced me to it. And I was like, wow, there's like so many different levels. And I wish I had learned this in my teacher ed programs. And when I think about professional learning, that's the lens that I keep thinking about is where are my own personal blind spots? What kind of professional learning am I not developing for host country teachers in other languages? You know, what groups and communities are not being served, because until they're all being served, there's still that lens of privilege that only some are getting professional learning and some are not. And so I'm super passionate about this and excited to work on this with all of you. So yay.
I think that's a really good point, Dana. I just, one of my other hats I wear is the journal editor for InterEd, which is the AAIE journal. But we just had an application, or a proposal, which I think is really interesting because she's talking about the lack of, and this relates to Sam's note and what Heather was saying as well, the lack of professional learning for local staff, local hires, local teachers, the differences in treatment between, and we all know this, from salary to services to real deep inclusion in professional learning. It's not that they're not allowed to sit in, but it's what you're saying, Dana. It's not designed for them. You know, it's designed primarily for the expat teacher who's hired and brought in, and not as much designed. And she's talking about some work they've been doing in Cyprus around cultural heritage courses. As the first course that is offered to expats coming in, and then more of a buddy system kind of a thing. So I think you're absolutely right about the fact that we're still designing professional learning based on Western models, based on primarily getting the expats acculturated or socialized into their setting. And yet the people who are the most stable, the ones who are apt to be there the longest, are really the ones who are not, and I'm not saying anything about your schools, I don't know your schools, are not as deeply included or designed for as we are for the incoming, you know, and I think the other thing that strikes me is the fact that, you know, we know that this is lifelong work, but we forget it. So every generation that comes to your building or comes to your school needs it again. And then it needs it from the orientation of your context, your country, your school. But then how do you design it so that you're advancing the perspective for those who've heard round one, you know, and now they are developmentally different, we hope, themselves. And so we're going to offer something different for them. It seems like we forget it. We get a real big push for doing X, Y, and Z. And then you guys could have new generations of teachers in 5 years. You could have whole new staff of people coming in. And yet we forgot we have to loop back and do CRT again or add, whatever it is that you're doing. So it really strikes me that there's some important information there about who are we designing for? And then what is it that we are offering that is specific to both the audience and the developmental level that they are coming to us with their backgrounds. So I appreciate that.
Well, is
Can I
it
add
the
one
different?
thing?
Sorry.
Sorry, Kimberly, go ahead.
No, I was just asking because I know I had a conversation with a former student, and now she's a principal at an international school, about, is this a difference between what's called induction and professional learning? Is it a difference in mindset? The ones that come into the school, and international schools have a transient population, they're 2-year contracts generally.
Yeah.
There's this track of what is needed for induction for the expat population and what is actually professional learning that should be coming under this umbrella of we are advancing the skills, knowledge, and attitudes of our faculty and staff. And that includes our expats as well as our local population. So I'm thinking of a conversation I had with Iman over this in terms of these tracks.
I agree. And I also think it goes back to the post-colonial heritage. If you're from the British tradition, everybody does training for 2 years and the teachers are all trained. And then if and only if you stay more than 2 years, you get what they call preparation, which is advanced development. But Heather, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say something along the same lines, but this induction is, I've been doing this for a long time now, being in international schools, and I have yet to be at a school that really looks at how we can work on having a good induction program for our expat teachers coming in, so that they're feeling a little bit more culturally competent. And cultural competence goes through being culturally competent goes through so many different phases and stages. And for some people, they come in and they're already a little bit more culturally competent, and others are way down at the very beginning. And do we do a good job? I don't feel as a school leader, and I've been a school leader now for about 15 years, I don't feel I've ever done a good job. And I know it's really hard. And here I'm in a new country, a new continent as well right now. And I find it's really hard when people do come in. Well, all they want to do is make sure their house is ready and their classroom is set up. So having that time to get them ready to better understand the culture is really difficult. And it's really interesting. I just had a conversation with a teacher maybe an hour ago, and she's feeling that that because she's a local staff member, she's from Cote d'Ivoire, she's being treated differently than she would be if she was an expat. And I mean, it was breaking my heart. I'm like, no, nobody's doing that. Now, it wasn't me, it was somebody else. And I'm like, no, that's not the intent. And I'm thinking, well, I hope it's not the intent, but I don't really know what the intent is. And I don't know how we break those barriers and how we can use professional development to move forward, because there's so much we need to do in international schools. And there's just a long way to go.
I think you're right. You know what? The other thing that strikes me is that it's the work on intercultural competence talks about it being a sliding scale. And I think that's one thing I would say that I think we need to be thoughtful about is culturally responsive teaching is a sliding scale. It goes up and it goes down, particularly as you're mobile around the world and you go to different settings and different places. So yeah, you carry a piece of it with you wherever you came from, if you got any at all. But the reality is you've got to renew it and re-understand. You've got to develop it within context of what does it mean to be in Guatemala? What does it mean to be in Cote d'Ivoire? What does it mean to be in Germany, for that matter? So it's like you carry it in a backpack, but it isn't stable. It's got to be renewed, reasserted, re-understood, depending on, especially as you travel, depending on the context.
And I'm finding now, the older I am, that is far more important than some of the other areas that we seem to think are so important when people come to a new country. Because if we don't understand that piece and we don't understand where we are in the context that we're in, we can make colossal mistakes, and that's not necessarily our intent. So I think we really do need to spend more time on this topic and working with our faculty and doing a better job of having that induction. I know I'm in the hiring period right now. A lot of us are starting to look at who's coming in next year, who's leaving. We really need to start that now. Whereas we're used to starting that, okay, they arrive in August and let's start to do some of that then. To me, it's too late. We need to start, doing it at the back end, before they even set foot in the country.
I think there's two facets too, right? Like, so not only for our new teachers coming in, right? Like, when I first started teaching in Thailand at the time, I don't know if they still do this, but the Thai government made us get certified in Thailand. And so I had to go through cultural courses on what does it mean to live in Thailand, which of all the places I've lived overseas, I feel more connected to Thailand and understand the culture and the why behind so many things that are part of that culture. And I mean, that's only, I scratched the surface, but it really helped me as a new teacher. And at the time I was thinking, this isn't about teaching, this isn't about learning. I was like, yeah, it is. I'm in this country, like I need to learn this. And then when I was in India, I was running a graduate program through SUNY, and what I loved about what I was able to do with our head of HR was I said, listen, we need to start letting all our local faculty in all of these courses. And he's like, well, they don't have the PD funds. They don't get this. That's not part of, their package. And I was like, I don't care. Like they're going to be here 5 years from now, and I'm not. Like, I can tell you right now, I'm not going to make it 5 more years. But let's get them in here. And when I look back on the teachers who went through that program, those teachers are still there, and they're still, embedding all of that professional development and all of that work into the school, and the school's really strong. But so many of the expat teachers are no longer there, and so it's so imperative to hit both sides, right? That both ends of the table need to understand for there to be really solidarity and to create that sustainability, because that's the one thing that our schools don't have is sustainability. We revolve and we have transition constantly, but if we can keep the learning and that main idea of what do we mean by pedagogy and instructional design, what do we mean as a school when we talk about certain things, and keep it within the school, then that's the thing that's going to keep us, I don't know, in a time when there's so much uncertainty. That would be nice if we could keep something.
I think you were really good, Dana, when you mentioned about the Thailand thing, because I was in Thailand for a long time. And I remember the exact same thing as you. And I remember at the time thinking, what am I doing? But I learned so much more about the culture and everything. And it is a really good idea to have something like that for everybody. Oh, it's breakout room time.
Okay, I cannot do that. Darnell
I
did
didn't
that.
even have to keep time. We are
Sorry.
leaving. Sam, who are you working with at Wilkes?
Well, I'm in their Ed D program, and Dr.
Yeah.
Fredrickson is the one who
I know
found
Ty
this out.
well. Next time
Yeah.
you talk to him, tell him I said hi.
Me too.
Oh, yes, for sure. Just a quick thing before we go, something that I would love to focus on that centers around everything is how we can amplify that local hire voice then, because that's our problem is even if we devote to both foreign hire and local, our foreign hire, they're loud and culturally they dominate. And so I think how to amplify so that it can live on that sustainability, and that's where I'm stuck. I don't know how. Yeah.
Multiple identities and language-wise.
Madeline, that's absolutely beautiful. Thanks for the chat, y'all. We're gonna come back together and wrap up. I hope the conversations went well. We're going to do just a quick debrief and share out. I believe the settings will allow you to share your screen if you want, but we have about 10 minutes left. Keep in mind that if you still wanted to continue to work and collaborate, we're going to be around for about 30 more minutes, but the space is open. Anyone care to share out some of the things that your breakout rooms did? I know it wasn't long. Go ahead, Gail.
So Trixie and I ended up in the same breakout room. Initially, I thought I might be on my own, but then thankfully she joined me. And we were looking at recruitment and retention. So we had a very brief conversation about that, but then unfortunately, we didn't quite get to the sheet, but we'll try to meet later and do it. We just had a conversation about where we'd come from and all the different things that we knew.
Yeah. That's important. Forget the sheet. That's important. Y'all are connected.
Trixie, did you need to add anything, darling?
I learned lots of things in the conversation, but it was I think part of the conversation we were having too was, and my question was about how do we put in some processes to make sure that we're recruiting not just top quality people, that we have a lens and eye for increasing identities and perspectives on our teams. And always trying to think about how we systematize it in a way to reduce our own bias when we're hiring, because we were able to identify that we have our biases when we're
Yeah. And the other thing we talked about was obviously with everything that's gone on with the pandemic, you know, more in-country teachers will be needed, and how important it is really to have that so that our children can see themselves reflected in the teaching staff. I also talked about how I think almost the students need to convince the stakeholders, but then Trixie made a very valid point that sometimes the students are very influenced by their parents and they have the same view. You see, I have 2 children that I can't make walk in a straight line. So I was thinking about my own children and the fact that they think, no, we can't do that. But you were right, Trixie. Other people's children are far more, what's the word?
No,
you know,
I think it's true though. I think kids' voice have the ability to change perspectives and minds of parents too. But I also think there's the other intervention has to be that leadership has to directly prioritize it and make sure it happens too, because it won't just happen on its own.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you both. Anyone else?
Could represent our curriculum development group if no one else in there wants to.
Go for it, Nina.
Okay. So we talked about a whole bunch of things about kind of doing an inventory of our, you know, current curriculum, and then having systems to revise it and to develop it and to reflect on it. And we kind of narrowed it down to the question, what is a curriculum review cycle that we can develop? And we kind of we're discussing a whole bunch of ideas about how a flexible curriculum review cycle could support the development, revision, and reflection of a curriculum in any school or context.
Thank you so much.
Nina, do you mind if I just add a little bit to that? Is that
Please
okay?
do. Oh my gosh,
Because I think often, at least where I am and where I have been, when we talk about curriculum, we're talking about like the resources and the case studies that we use and things like that. But I think a forgotten part and a more difficult part or a more challenging part to work with is the other part of the curriculum, right? The delivery and the classroom management and you know, assessment policies and things like that. And that would be a really important part of evaluating, you know, if you're having a culturally responsive classroom, right? Because there are so many different ways that people learn and communicate and express themselves. And I think no matter how great the content is, it's not going to fall into place until we look at the whole package.
Anyone from professional learning or the main Zoom room want to speak?
Well, I can for professional learning, but Samantha, Heather, would you like to chime in at all? No, okay. How does that happen? I don't get it. We did not fill out our chart, and maybe Dana might have, she was there, but we'd spent a lot of time relationship building. So that was good, without titles. Kind of what we talked about before about who we are, kind of what we know and what we were interested in. We talked a lot about the development of induction programs and professional learning programs and, you know, buying the time to do that. But we also really focused on the fact of who are we doing professional learning for? And one of the big issues was the lack of real, not in all schools, and I don't know your schools, I've already said that quite today a number of times, but the lack of professional development for our local hires in the language of their heritage and in their home knowledge and in what they bring. And when we talk about who's actually going to be at that school over a long period of time, it's by and large not your expats. So how do we really focus on these issues around our local population and the delivery of professional learning? And then certainly what does it mean to be culturally responsive wherever you are. And so we know context is different. We know the people are different. And so we've got to amplify that. And I think that was Sam's word, which was amplify the voices of the local families, participants, the local hires, the local teachers, and ensuring that they're not just getting the same, how can I say, that it's equitable. We're not just allowing them to sit in on the professional development for the expats. We are designing to amplify their knowledge, amplify the heritage, amplify what they bring to the classrooms, and help them feel as valued as the rest of the team. So I think that's where we landed. Heather, Sam, Kim, anything else? So thanks for the time. Yeah, go ahead.
No, she did. That was a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Anyone from the main room? I saw Michael. I think you unmuted yourself.
All right. So we explored culturally responsive education and defining what is that for Darnell shared some of his work. We did the world's ever quickest literature review. And we established that actually a lot of the background research into culturally responsive education is actually founded in good practice. Good practice. When you look at it, you say, and this is the discussion where we started off, was, well, that's just good practice, giving voice and choice to students, having high expectations, and we shared some of our own experiences. And I think the thing that probably resonates for me in it is that we all had examples of aspects of culturally responsive education, but was it really embedded? Were we making it a longer lasting impact on the education of our community that was going to continue on? And we recognise the longer we talk, the more subgroups that were created, that there was the more issues that we knew that we'd have to confront. And so overall, that's about what I can provide. Madeline?
Yeah, it was good to have that little sort of like background, just to understand our context and what I think, Darnell, what what it means, because it has been called different things through the years and in different ways of approaching it. But I think what we're all saying here is that we want to be intentional. We talked a little bit about language and how language is so loaded. That's where culture lives. And so, or at least it's how it's expressed and felt. So we talked about how do we find ways to be more open to different kinds of languages, not just home languages, mother tongue, etc., but also different ways of speaking whatever is the majority tongue. So being more, for example, if you're a non-native speaker of whatever the language is, Spanish for me, or English, let's say, then how can we be more aware of language learning and not necessarily labeling it or judging it as outside, that because everybody is a language learner, including native speakers of the language. So, yeah.
So we're going to ask that everyone accept and tolerate non-closure, and also recognize that whatever happened tonight or this morning or this afternoon was the only thing that could have happened. If you do want to stick around longer to further explore, you can. I hope that you all exchanged information. If the only thing you did today was build community, that's important in organizing, and that's important in building towards something else. So the objective here wasn't to complete a sheet or a slide. It was to engage critically with one another. So if you want to continue chatting, stick around. If you want to build with other folks, exchange information. But thank you so much for allowing Dana and I to co-facilitate. We really appreciate you all sharing space with us. in
Thank
each
you.
other.
Thank you
Go ahead,
all.
Dan.
We recorded it. We'll send it out to the big group. There's over 100 of us. So there's a lot of people who want to participate in different conversations and things like that and get involved. And we really would love to see if this is something you're super passionate about, any one of these subjects or another one, feel free to just go with it. Run with it. Do whatever you want. Create the thing that makes you passionate about wanting to give up your time and donate your energy and your expertise to these different areas, because we need help. There's so many different ways that we can grow and really help our sector in general, and we're open to anything and everything. So we appreciate all of you and your time. Thank you. All right, so Darnell and I will stick around. I'm like ready to like redo all PD around the world. So, you know, I don't think I can get that done in a half hour, but
Hey, Dana and Darnell, or one of you or to both of you. Hi, Dana. I'm David. I think we met before with Stacy
I think so
Stevens is
too.
a mutual friend. Just curious, just is there any, I know you're giving us resources. I know is this the focus of the PD session, the culturally responsive learning community that ISS is hosting really soon? I think it was just terrible. Is that I remember seeing an advertisement, maybe several, from ISS on a PD that's coming up about, is it curriculum work?
Is that in the newsletter?
I'm trying to think which one that was. I
I
know
don't know if I saw that.
Darnell and I did a whole bunch last year, but I don't know if we have anything set for this year on this. Let me look real quick.
Yeah, I'm trying to find what it was a recent, anyway, if not, what is there like you're talking about being a PD junkie or PD addict. I'm really curious if there's any good PD you'd recommend for, obviously online, probably just to get us connected. Like what's a session that we could go to help us? I love talking about what it could be, but at the same time, I almost feel like I need a framework to ground me a little bit. We really have a lot of work to do here in The Hague, and I want to hang my hat on something, or maybe a good group that you've worked with to help think through that lens.
I think we can be that group. So we're going to build, and this is what I was showing Madeline and Michael, just different artifacts related to culturally responsive curriculum, culturally responsive instruction, culturally responsive assessment, research in the last 10 years. When Michael said we did a lit review, that's pretty much what we did. We just went through all of the literature and looked at the strategies. So what we could do is we can collaborate on building a website for our education committee, just so that we can see the conceptual and the theoretical frameworks that will be informing this work. So yeah, we can work on that.
Yeah, and Darnell, so Darnell ran 2 courses for ISS last year that really worked on this as well, and touched upon some of these issues. But Darnell, if you're interested, we can run something again.
Let's talk. But maybe we can get it. Maybe we can get a crew of people from our education committee that can just hold space and hold conversations and run text protocols, because I am down, but I also want to see if anyone actually has any appetite for some co-facilitation. And I think what you said, Beverly, really resonates with me. And I was going to ask if you had any research or anything that I can read on that, because I'm currently trying to plan culturally responsive PD for the local hires and the instructional assistants at my school. And I'm supposed to actually have had that done by tomorrow, but it's not done. We can edit that part out the video. But Beverly, if you have anything, I would love to explore that.
I'm going to look further into that. And that was one of the reasons I stayed behind, because I really do think we need to cultivate some, not just resources, but some more information. The outreach I had was a woman in Cyprus, and I'm happy to connect you to her, who wants to write a series of articles. And it's a course that they've actually created for all of their teachers, local hires, and their incoming expats. It's a cultural heritage course. And that's one of the ways they're beginning the conversation with people incoming, so that they more deeply understand the heritage of Cyprus, the people who live in Cyprus, why they're there, all of those different kinds of things. I haven't followed up with her to find out then what do they do next, because I know there are big issues around parity of decision making, certainly parity in salary and travel reimbursement. I know there are a few schools that do have parity, but I don't know who they are, which was my question to your team about whether or not this is something we need to investigate. Me and my research kind of things, investigate, go ask the schools, who is doing this work with their local population that is really allowing for equity and parity. And I have to tell you, Daryl, I hear bits and pieces, but I don't hear anybody that is really saying, not only are we beginning like you are with the professional learning, but we've done this for years, and this is the way it's worked out. And it's kind of an all call. I think we need to find out, and I don't think that I've seen it per se more directly in terms of culturally responsive teaching. But I'll search for you. It won't be by tomorrow. I think we need a call on that one, because I think it's coming up a lot. No, it comes up a lot. If we really do mean equity and social justice and inclusion, then what are we doing with our local population?
Definitely.
I'd love to know more of that too.
With our local population, and what are we doing with the expats to help them understand the local population?
Well, it's that back to intersectionality. It isn't an either or, it's and both. Kind of a thing.
Are we thinking maybe doing some sort of survey out, or?
Well, yeah.
Let's find the information. Yes, that's where I'm going on.
Yeah, I know what we're doing.
Oh, yeah, I know where we're going now.
Yay. We're such geeks.
Heather, what were you going to say?
I'd love to be involved in anything like that, any surveys or whatever. But I also think the other piece that fits into this is the climate of the school. And I know there was nobody that went into that breakout group today, but that's something that we really need to touch upon too, is what is that school climate? Is there, the groups are together, the locals and the expat are together, or are they completely divided? And how do we bring them together? Because to me, it's not okay that we have this barrier, and it does go back to that parity issue. How are they being, what are their benefits? Do they get the same PD as, the expat staff? Are they able to do that? And we had that conversation today. There's a conference it's a CENIA conference, the first face-to-face conference in Bonn. And I'm going to take a group of teachers. We're making sure we take local staff.
Right.
I mean, we have to. And so we're making sure, because everybody needs to be part of that conversation.
Yeah.
And
I think you're right.
I think it's also too, like, I know at my previous school in Hong Kong, even just our Mandarin teachers received different PD than all of our other teachers. And then I would sit there in meetings, and sometimes, and I loved my school, but like someone would be like, who is that person? I'm like, you don't know who that is? Like, they teach down the hall. And so it wasn't like, yes, they were local, but they're not local. Like, they're not necessarily local, but like we were separating and doing an otherness for some parts of our curriculum compared to others. And that's not fair, because we should all be going through things together. And then I thought, well, then what is it that we're not doing in PD that they would also find valuable? Like, why aren't we trying to meet their needs instead of just assuming that they need to jump into ours?
I wonder too, Daryl, and you could talk me into anything. In fact, I wish I could just keep you in my head, because of the way, we have to be happy with a lack of closure right now. I could have used that 12 times this week. It would have been wonderful. And now I will, and I will give you full credit for it. But I'm just wondering if part of the development in this group is also with allyship. I think you're terrific, but I also could see you getting burnt out. And so are there pairs of people? And you and Dana have done a good job. You co-taught and things like that. Are there ways to build allyship? Because to be real frank with you, at least in the United States, I can get away with saying things that a Black colleague could not.
Mhm.
And they will listen. Maybe I scare them to death or something. I'm not really sure. But building an allyship team then helps us capture more of our population into the conversation than if it was perceived as just one person saying that this is what you need to do, as opposed to a team approach to saying we're allies, we're learning from one another, we're on the same page, and this is how we're going to do professional learning as a group of allies or as a team. And so I'm wondering if we're doing some of that.
That's exactly what we're going for with the culturally responsive learning communities, because we tried to do it on a smaller scale with our course, and we really did lean on white educators to do some of the heavy lifting, and saying that this is not just the Black colleagues' problem to solve, this is white educators' problem to solve. And Dana and I reflected on that too, and I think there were some tensions there, but there were also some opportunities there, and we want to further build upon that. And one of the ways that we're trying to build upon that is to not have a one-off workshop or a one-off course on culturally responsive education, but building sustained learning communities where this work has staying power and it permeates beyond curriculum development in every single aspect of school. And our focus on within learning organizations and as adult learners isn't just 2 people doing the facilitating or 4 people doing the facilitating, but a team of folks that can make sure it permeates and has staying power wherever you go in the international school world.
Mhm. Mhm.
So David's going to be one of our facilitators.
I love that's kind of why I stuck around. I've got to go pretty quick here, but I'm just wondering what next. How can we keep involved, and how can we kind of build this community to be, like something that we could support our own schools, but it's where, if you've been around, like this is my 6th school, and you want to make every work in every school and make it better, and have them, kind of embrace the message. And I said to a colleague, I said, I used to think I knew what the work was, and I used to think it, and now it just completely shifted, right? In the last year and a half, pandemic, Black Lives Matter, everything has been, but I think we just have to keep it moving forward. And that's why, what's next is kind of my question.
What would be your priority, David? What do you think is the what's next?
Well, I mean, personally, I think I need to do a bit more my own learning. I think that's what I was asking about, kind of a PD that might help me, or maybe a book to hang a hat on of, and there's no simple solution. I've actually been in hiring an assistant principal this past week. And one of our questions is, what does diversity and equity look like in school life, in a student life? How would you help that live? And I think that's where I'd love to start with that focus, where we need to learn as an one of the responses was it comes from the top down. And if the leadership team doesn't buy in, and kind of through the hiring practices, obviously, and then it permeates through the system. You can't just have, here's an advisory lesson to do with kids, right? Like, it has to look, the face of your school has to look different, I think. And I think that's, I think I'm hoping that, affinity groups is one of our processes, also kind of engaging. We mentioned a curriculum review cycle that really builds. I used to think, I jokingly said, we used to think, let's build curriculum review around design and inquiry. And actually it's really about equity and justice and diversity and inclusion, right? So I think hopefully those are our priorities. Thanks, Dana.
Yeah, those scorecards I thought would be, as a previous curriculum person, I thought like, oh my gosh, I would love to put our curriculum through those scorecards. I thought I was like, why didn't I have this a couple of years ago? Because I would have used this in every single aspect of our curriculum. So yeah.
I've used those scorecards. I teach one of the classes I teach. I make my students run some of their curriculum through scorecards. and we talk about over, they have a week to do it, and then we're talking about over the following week, and they're interacting with the others. And my students are all over the world. It was not the most interesting week of conversations, because probably the DEIJ week was probably the most interesting week of conversations for that class. But they were looking at how not aligned, honestly, their curriculum was. And particularly in the US schools that, they have to be standards, they're very tied to standards and things like that. And my students do come from every subject. So it's a very telling experience to go through that scorecard for people. And I think a very meaningful one.
I
But
always
then you have
find
to
it
have
interesting-
administrators. I was just gonna say, then you have to have the administrators ready to debrief. I mean, you can debrief because you've kind of got a captured audience and the work and things like that. But if you did it in a school, you have to be sure that you've got your administrative team ready, to do that kind of debrief with your teachers. So that goes back to David's comment about, around learning for leadership and getting them on board. In terms of being able to do this work. And I think what's really interesting, David, that you commented on is it's really easy to deflect to the kids, oh, this is what we're going to do with children. Adults have a really hard time looking at themselves. And yet, it's easier to say, let me tell you what we do in our school with the kids. Let me tell you what we do in our school that the students participate in. And yet the reflective piece is really with us, I think, as the adult learners. And I think that's real hard to get to sometimes.
Yeah, and that's one of the ways I'm actually ending is when I do the exercise, the prompts for my students are, now if you were going to take this to an administrator, how are you going to craft that given the climate in your building and given the conditions in your school system or your school district? And, because the students in my class, they are looking towards leadership positions or, to be an IB coordinator or something further ahead than,
I think that's something else that we have to consider too, is I think oftentimes we're teaching teachers how to be resilient in systems that are oppressive and inequitable. I think part of our work needs to be through the lens of coaching the responsive school leadership. And how do we work with our school leaders who are in influential positions to disrupt? So Kimberly, like the work that you're doing around teacher education at your level is wonderful. I think we need to bring that same level of teacher education to school-based teacher educators so that they're doing the same thing and it's common practice. Because I think what you're describing is amazing.
And I want
tried.
to piggyback.
That's all.
Yeah, I agree. And I wanted to piggyback on that and just say too, that too often I think teachers or schools or school leaders blame the standards on why they can't do things. And the standards generally are not content. The content is where so much of the bias comes in. And we say, oh, well, we have to teach Lord of the Flies. There's not one standard that says Lord of the Flies. And so it's just amazing to me how much we tend to do a blame game sometimes to those. And I'm not a huge fan, although I can do anything. I can make standards sing, but I do not, but they end up getting the bad. I'm working with these schools in Finland right now, and I'm trying to show them, I'm like, the standards are not your limitation. Your limitation is your own mind and the way you're trying to approach curriculum. Because we can tweak those however you need them to.
You're right. The standards are not the enemy. That sometimes the teachers think the pacing guide is the enemy, but that may say Lord of the Flies. But yes, it's all this conversation with teachers that we need to have. But we do know there are some schools that the climate is far more open, and there are some schools where the climate is far more limiting. And I can say I'm in the middle of a study with English teachers right now, and I've been conducting some interviews, and that's becoming abundantly clear around the world with the way the school climate operates and what you are being allowed to teach.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to look more at that. I don't know if anybody has any ideas on that, but the climate is really something that's important to me now. I am working in a very culturally diverse school, and I'm in West Africa. Climate is everything to me right now, because if I don't have that positive climate here, there's not a lot I'm going to be able to do to move forward as a leader. And so I any help, any resources would be great, but I think we need to look at the climate in order to do a lot of these other things. Even in order to get the PD to move along, all of that. If the climate's not there, even though you can throw money at people, if they still don't feel that they're valued and they're being listened to, we're not going to be able to move very far.
So Heather, there's a book by Muhammad Khalifa. It's called Coach the Responsive School Leadership.
I
And
got
there's a
that.
whole, oh yeah, that whole chapter on inclusive school environments or whatnot. And I know he's talking about Detroit and other cities in the Midwest, but it's been so incredibly helpful in working with not just my school, but folks from other schools. I'm really grounding Coach the Responsiveness, not just in the curriculum, but ensuring that it permeates the school climate. But you already have it.
No, but I read it ages ago. That's a long time. I think I was at your school when I saw him, that was, gosh, ages ago. So I need to go back to it. That's why you keep these books and you go back to everything. So thank you for reminding me.
Well, an older book than that is called Inviting School Success. And it was it's a whole school approach to creating a climate and inviting, literally it was by Bill Perkey, P-U-R-K-E-Y, and it's online, you can find it now. But it was an interesting approach to improving school achievement in US schools, I'll tell you up front, but it really included everybody from the cafeteria workers to the women, primarily women at the front desk, to the security guard. Everybody was designed around this whole notion of, I think the words were able, valuable, and responsible. Everybody in the school. You're able, you're valuable, and you're responsible. And that's the way we're going to do school. And they actually did show significant changes in both the climate and the environment, the way the teachers viewed it and the way that the students had. It was one of the original studies. So it's been around. And I think you're absolutely right, Heather, that, you know, the climate, I used to say that if I ever redid my entire career, I'd go after school leaders, because I tell you what, they set the bar. They do. They're either the gatekeeper or the, you know, gate opener. And but I'm too old to start over again. But yes, if I find anything, Heather, I'll send it to you.
Please, could you send me?
I think that could be our motto. Let's go after school leaders. It can be a double entendre. And let's do it. Let's go after school leaders. So all right, y'all. It's about bedtime here in Singapore, and I have several sessions I'm supposed to be leading tomorrow. It will be fun. It will be fun, but we'll close things out. And Dana, if you have 5 minutes, I would love to debrief before bed.
Okay, you got it.
Thanks, Darnell, Dana.
Good
Thanks a
night,
lot.
Darnell.
Thank
So
you,
much for
everyone.
being
Together.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.
Bye. We'll be in
everybody.
touch.
Good night.
Later. All right.
That was awesome. What a great conversation.
Just stop.
Oh, yeah.